Hi, I'm Patrick, and welcome back to another episode of the Elite Wealth Podcast. And I'm here again with Matthew and Victor. And today we are going to start out talking about chili.
Chili.
Noodles or no noodles? Beans or no beans?
No beans.
No beans?
I don't like the kidney beans.
I like kidney beans. But noodles?
I like noodles.
I like noodles.
I really don't know what you guys are talking about. I mean, chili has beans and there's no noodles in it. So
Yeah, there is. You put elbow macaroni.
How do you cook the
you guys
beans?
are eating spaghetti.
No, it's elbow macaroni. And then do you sour cream?
I do like sour cream.
And cheese?
Oh
yeah.
We used to do sour cream, but now, actually, if you use...
He said he wasn't going to talk about chili.
I know he did. He didn't want to partake. He didn't want to partake.
You guys talking crazy. I have to lay the law down. So, alternative option. You ever have Greek yogurt instead of sour cream? Tastes the same, but it's healthier.
It does not taste the same. Yogurt and sour cream don't sound like the same thing.
Yes.
I think he's losing his taste buds.
I think so.
You guys want to talk about chili? Don't talk to these guys. They don't know what they're talking about.
We'll have a cook-off.
We should. We should have a little chili cook-off.
Chili cook-off. All of our clients can come down and check it out.
In our church group, out of 12 couples, 2 years ago, we took first place. So we must know a little something about chili.
Oh, the other 12 couples forgot to bring their chili?
No.
Oh.
No, he bought it from somewhere.
Yeah, we're on a good roll. We won the chili cook-off. I won fantasy football last year. So it's looking good. These guys don't even know what to say.
There's an asterisk behind that.
I think so. The guy who's starting a not rookie.
Yeah. All right, let's get
we'll get into that. All right. So today we're going to go back on the topic of annuities, and we're going to cover a couple more annuities. Today we're going to talk about a variable annuity, and then we're going to talk about a buffered or registered index linked annuity, and we're going to cover the ins and outs. The last one is a little bit newer, as far as I don't think many people have heard of it, but the registered index linked annuity is something that's a little bit different, and maybe even a little closer to the variable, and in between variable and index. So let's start off talking about that index linked annuity or the buffered annuity. And Matt, I think you're going to share a little bit about that and help our audience understand what that is and how it works.
Yeah. So with the index linked annuity, we look at something that most people know, like the S&P 500, and we track that index typically for a year. Okay. So if you start your policy in July, it goes to July of next year. Now, it tracks it and sees how the performance does. And if it's up a certain, or if the index is up, then you get credited a certain amount. And that amount that's determined is based on your cap. So a cap is the highest amount that you can get credited based on that contract amount. Now, with the registered link, that's a little bit different than the other annuity products that we've talked about. Is a lot of times they have what's called a buffer. So a lot of people like this because they're always worried about, what if the stock market crashes? My dad says all the time, Matthew, I don't want to go through another 2008 again. Most people don't want to get into retirement. So with the buffer, let's say we have a 10% buffer. So most policies say if you have a 10% buffer on your policy, if the market goes down 5%, you don't lose anything. If it goes down 7%, you don't lose anything. If the market were to go down 12%, and your buffer's at 10, you would only lose 2% of the total value of your policy. And there's a little bit more to it, but a high level, that's kind of how it works. And then obviously on the upside, a lot of times you can have a 15% or 20% cap. So the bonus is your cap, your earning potential is a little bit higher than they are with the typical fixed indexed annuity.
But you might be exposed to some downside risk.
Correct.
Even with the buffer. And from my experience, when you're looking at these buffered annuities or registered index linked annuities, the more buffer you have, the less upside you're going to get. So if you want to buffer 30% to the downside, you're going to have very little cap, very little earning potential on the top side. If you take a 10% buffer, they're going to give you a whole lot more on the upside. Another thing that I've noticed about them, the ones that I've seen, is that they'll have what's called like a multi-year approach. So instead of that 1 year, they'll have like a 5-year or a 6-year or 7-year. And essentially nothing really locks in, if you will, until the end of that period. Meanwhile, all the while, you're just paying a fee to have that account. So I don't know if, it could be right in some situations. I don't know where I would use it at this point, but what else?
And I think there's some pros and cons with that. So like Patrick said, So we've dealt with these where it could be a 2, 3, 5-year term, where let's say in 3 years the market does really well 2 of the years, but then the third year the market does horrible. So it kind of balances things out. People are looking for a return at the end of the 3-year period, and a lot of times there isn't as good of a return as what they were hoping. And all along, while they're paying a fee taken out of their overall pot of money. So that's why a lot of times, unless it makes specific sense, we don't use these a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, they're also probably the second most complicated annuity out there. I don't know that there's a lot to it. And when index annuities, when we're looking at index annuities, we oftentimes there's options to go multiple years. You can do a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year indexing period, they call it. The downside is you're none of your interest locks in. You don't get any compounding effect. You don't get that resetting effect. Annual reset, in my opinion, is the key to making these things work. Where again, I can see where buffered, you can definitely do those. They can work, but I guess in my mind, unless it's non-qualified money, you're trying to tax deferral, you can buy a buffered ETF. It's going to do exactly the same thing. So if you buy a buffered ETF, it's the same concept. Gives you a buffer on the downside, gives you upside, but it takes away all those expenses, and it just is more. It can be well. I mean, sometimes. I mean, usually there's some sort of sub account fee, or there's some sort of expense ratio that goes along with them. But more or less, yeah. I mean, they just don't have all that encumbrance of different things. So if it's the IRA, comparing the two, I don't really see a big value in the linked annuity, the registered linked annuity. I don't know if you have anything you want to add, Victor, on that. And
no, I can just honestly say I don't think over the last, I don't know, 10 years, any one of us three have used those in any of our planning for our clients, just because they're really complicated and there may be a better way to get the job done when it comes to growing your money, I think.
Yeah, I think it's hard for people to understand. The worst part is we do a plan, and we're looking for, something to provide secure, whether it's income or return for a client. And you start explaining some of the products such as this, and people just get uncomfortable because they don't really understand it. I think it's Warren Buffett who always talks about understanding what you're investing your funds in.
Yep.
Obviously, we're here, and that our job is to educate you on all the different options available to you. But really, if you don't understand it, it's just hard for a lot of people to get excited about putting your money into a product like that.
And I would say for sure, the couple I've run into, because it seems like things become a fad, and all of a sudden you see people that have some of these, right? A lot of times it doesn't feel like the person who sold that really understands them fully all the way. Where a lot of times we have to either consult the prospectus, or we have to call the company to get the exact information about exactly how it works. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Again, I would never ever say there's a bad investment. I'm not saying this is a bad investment, but we need to have it purpose built, right? So it's got to have a purpose for that investment, and we need to understand we're investing, right? So that's important. The other thing too is that, quite frankly, just because it's a good tool in one application doesn't mean it's in another. So it just depends upon your situation. There's bad application, good tools. We just have to make sure we get good application with that. Okay, so we didn't spend a lot of time on that one today because, quite frankly, there's not a ton to talk about. They're fairly relatively new. They're a little bit more complicated. You can add all kinds of bells and whistles on it. And I think we're going to cover the bells and whistles much better in the next section, which we're going to move and talk about variable annuities. And I would say this is the redheaded stepchild of the annuity world, where if you hear something negative, it's probably most likely about the variable annuity. I think that to an extent, it's a little bit of a bad rap. I think that some of the variable annuities can make sense. Again, what's the purpose behind it? Does it the right fit for you? Is it just the correct application of that investment as well? Victor, you're going to talk a little bit more about the variables, so help educate the audience about variable annuities.
Yeah, so like Patrick said, it's kind of the redhead child of the annuity world. And, before I get into all of that, remember that, we were just talking about a variable annuity the other day that is going to be a great investment for a client of ours.
Yep.
In general, when it comes to variable annuities, I like to compare them to food plots. We're all big hunters, right? So we all create food plots for when we're hunting deer. And when we create our food plots, what we want to do is we get a great yield of a crop, essentially, just like farmers too. So if I create a food plot for hunting, and I plant winter rye. I'm going to get a great yield of winter rye. It's going to come up beautifully as long as the weather and sun participate with me. Um, that's using one specific investment for one specific tool. Variable annuities, how I kind of like to explain them is going to Walmart and getting a throw and grow bag for a food plot that has a mix of corn, soybeans, winter rye, radishes, turnips, the whole nine. So you get a little yield of everything. And I think that's kind of how variable annuities are sold some of the times, where you're going to get growth, you're going to get a death benefit, you're going to have an income rider on there, you're going to have downside protection. So variable annuities a lot of the times will get sold in a way that kind of say they're good at everything, but not great at one thing. And because they're okay at everything, a lot of the times that's where the fees come from. So variable annuities, a lot of the times I'll ask folks that have variable annuities, well, what are you currently paying for that variable annuity? And they have absolutely no idea. And the main reason for that is the prospectus for a variable annuity is like a dictionary.
Mhm.
Nobody takes the time to read through them either. So it's very common, I would say, to see fees 3, 4, 5% on a variable annuity that you have no idea you're paying. So they can be extremely expensive investments that only perform okay at a lot of things. So when I'm looking for an investment, I want it to do amazing at one specific thing, and variable annuities kind of get away from that. Again, there are good variable annuities out there, but for the most part, I just want to caution you, if you have one, I think it would be a great idea to come into the office here and chat through it a little bit. Um, because a lot of the times we can look at maybe transitioning out of that or maybe changing something in up within the variable annuity. But it's an investment that, says it's good at a lot of things, but not great at one thing, I would say overall. What am I
Yep.
missing here?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think just to build off that a little bit more, when we're talking about fees within the variable annuity, just a good example. Recently, a couple came in. They've had a variable annuity for close to 15 years. They had no idea what they were paying annually for fees. So I said, it's hard to tell just based on the statement that you get. Do you mind calling the company with me? So we called together. Come to find out, they're paying almost 4% a year on their variable annuity. Had no
It's
idea.
it's amazing how many people, say, well, that's not me. That's, I
Yeah.
know, I trust my person. I don't see it in my statement.
Mhm.
And that's one of the big things I think that hurts that industry or that product specifically is they really clearly don't explain the fees. And unless you, like you said, go through the prospectus, call the company, you're not going to know. And I think it's that kind of a black eye in our industry a little bit too, because it's not fully disclosed to you, the consumer, what exactly you're getting. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not that. I mean, the worst, I don't know, what's the highest fee you ever saw on a variable?
A little over 5.
Over 5. I had 7 for a client. 7%. It had every bell and whistle you could possibly imagine on it. 7%. We verified it with the company. How about yourself?
I think between the 5 and 6 range, so very high.
So they exist out there. And how hard is it to make money? If the S&P 500's done 10% historically, let's just say, pretty darn hard to make money in that. So,
Well, and a lot of times it's multiple fees, so it's not just one annual fee. A lot of times you'll have 3, 4, maybe more different fees that you're even unaware of.
And another quick client story. I had a client come in and they had a variable annuity, and their goal with the variable annuity was for income. They wanted guaranteed income. So that variable annuity was going to provide them with about $8,000 a year worth of income. I said, okay, well, you're paying 4% for this, you know, income product. Let's shop that around and see if we can do better. And with a fixed index annuity, which we've talked about on a previous show, I was able to cut their fee in half and double their income.
Hmm,
So again, that's
that's a
why
big deal.
I really like using, if we want income, let's find you the best income. Let's not take out a product that has a bunch of bells and whistles that's gonna not really provide you with what you need. So I mean, there's thousands of stories we've had where we kind of looked into stuff like that. But again, they can be a good investment. You just have to be really careful. If you hear the word variable attached to an annuity, just make sure you do your research.
Yeah, and that's where, quite frankly, like I said, most of the negative comments, articles, whether it's ARP or whoever, they're putting out about annuities and that general terminology. If you read through the article, you can pretty quickly see it's a variable annuity they're referring to. And I think it really, really comes from how it's sold. You have all the upside of the stock market. Why would you want to limit your upside to your stock market? You have downside protection. You have lifetime income. You have all these things that sound really, really great, easy to sell. And then the advisor doesn't have to explain on the statement that they get every quarter or, once a month at what the fees are because they're not on there. They're just buried in the performance. I've seen plenty of variable annuities that people have had for in excess of 15 years, and they haven't even doubled their money yet. Rule of 72. What does rule of 72 say, Matt?
You take 72, you divide it by your average return, and that tells you how many years it takes to double your money.
Yeah. So if you aren't doubling your money in 15 years, that's about a 4.6% rate of return. That's not spectacular. You can probably do that in a CD right now. It's just about, it's just not real great. So those are just things to kind of be aware of on that. We keep your costs down. The case that Victor and I were working on for a client where we went and we actually did some research and we found a variable annuity because we needed the tax sheltering. We need that tax deferral. The client did not want to pay taxes on it. That annuity has no fees in it, except for you have your mortality expense. Or not mortality, sorry, you have your expense ratio. Your expense ratio, every mutual fund has an expense ratio and has it, and that's what you pay for. But there aren't all these M&E mortality expense. There's not the contract administrative fee. There's not a lifetime income rider. There's not a guaranteed minimum death benefit. There's not all this other stuff wrapped around the fee on top of the fee on top of the fee. So there exists. They're out there. But when I was in the industry early on in my career and I worked for a large insurance company, we were convinced that what they had was the best. And that's why we should sell it. So it's one of those things, again, people in our industry are very nice. I never would think anybody would do anything maliciously or anything like that. But you're convinced. You're like, this is the greatest thing. And they're going to convince you as well. Just make sure we do our homework and we're aware. If you wanted to have a complimentary consultation with our office, you give us a call at 715-341-8899 or just visit us on the web at eliteretirementgroup.com. We'd be more than happy to give you a review, let you know how exactly that policy is working, and then you can make the decision on what you want to do with it from there. So now what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about some of the specific features in annuities. I think that there's some really positive things out there. One of the ones I wanted to talk about is that income rider that doubles. And I'm sure you guys have probably run into that before, where some annuities have a feature where if you can't perform 2 of 6 activities of daily living, if you're getting a monthly payout, annual payout, whatever that payout is, they'll double it for a 5-year period. So, for example, I had a client that had an health issue come up, where he qualified for it. And instead of getting his $5,000 a year, he got 10. Now, unfortunately, he didn't live for the 5 years, but at the end, now he's gone. Whatever's left in the policy is going to go to his wife, which is really nice. But that's a feature I really like. I look to try to see if I can find that because I can help deal with that long-term care gap that it can be an issue for folks if we're not planning for it. It's not going to solve the problem, right? It's going to put some extra money in your pocket, though, and it doesn't cost you anything.
And it's one way to fix the problem. Like you say, a lot of people look at long-term care insurance. They see the cost for it. A lot of times they don't think about it until their retirement age and they go, oh my gosh, the payments are crazy. Well, one of the solutions is looking at, well, can we, secure the funds a little bit better and get a safer return in the annuities and then have the option to double our payments, obviously, if that were to occur and go down that route, but not having to go down the long-term care insurance route, which is very attractive to people as well.
Yeah, just some alternative planning. Is there anything that you could think of, any special features that any annuity really possesses that you think is really kind of a neat thing for folks to be aware of?
Yeah, I think long-term care planning, I would say, would be one of the bigger ones out there for extra benefits. But one thing I really like, because with a lot of annuities, what you do is you give up that liquidity. So with some annuities, you can add what's called a return of premium rider, where basically at any point you can say, okay, I want all the money I put into this annuity back out. Now, obviously, when we create your investment plan, we're going to make sure we have enough liquidity to accomplish what we want to accomplish. But worst case scenario, we needed to liquidate everything. We can pull all that money back out of the annuity. So, getting that, return of premium rider on there can be great. Just keep in mind, typically the more riders you add, the fees are going to go up for you.
Yep.
So you really have to tailor it to what you're looking for.
And with those riders, I think it's extremely important for people to realize or note how much time we spend dealing with like an estate attorney to make sure that the riders are set up correctly. So, for example, you have an income rider and you want to make sure that it passes on to your spouse, you need to make sure that the beneficiaries are set up correctly so that it passes properly to your spouse. Most people just assume, well, I put my spouse's name, and that may or may not be the right way to do it. That's where we really want to make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's so that there are no issues.
Especially with some legal planning options that are out there. If you're doing an irrevocable income trust, and you would normally typically put the trust as the primary beneficiary, that can totally blow up your entire income rider for your spouse. So you want to really be careful with that. That's something that we've seen happen, unfortunately. But I think, for those that are a little more aware of it, it's definitely something to catch. One other thing I just want to comment on, something I like is I'm a little more partial to, is that we work with a company that has what's called a trigger cap on it. So basically what it does is it looks at the S&P 500, and if the S&P 500 is flat or positive, you're going to get a certain return. So for example, right now, I believe it's 7.75%, that if the market's flat, the S&P 500 is flat or up for the year, you're going to make that 7.75%. The thing that's really cool, and the reason I'm saying something is because this last April, when we had all the stuff going on with tariffs and the market was pretty ugly, the market actually came in flat for a couple of my clients that have these, and they actually made a little over 8%.
Nice.
That's the interest they made for that year. And now here's the other cool thing, is now it starts from that point in April, and now it goes 1 year from there to see if they're going to make another 8%. So they stand a really darn good chance of doing actually really pretty well. So I really kind of like that triggered cap type of situation and there's only a couple companies that have them, but that one company I'm thinking of particularly, I really, really like. They're a great company. We use them for a long time, and they're very, very consistent for our clients.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think, talking about, some, extra benefits here, another one out there that can work in certain situations would be, big bonuses. So,
Yep.
essentially, a lot of the times you'll see them on fixed index annuities where, let's just say we're going to put 200,000 into a fixed index annuity with a 20% bonus. So immediately when you put your money into that policy, you get a 20% bonus, which is great in some situations. For example, maybe we're looking at legacy planning where we want our kids to inherit a large chunk of money. Our health isn't doing too well. Let's make 20% right off the bat. If we think things aren't looking too well, then the beneficiaries will inherit that large chunk of change. Or, if we're in a situation where we're getting older, we want this money to be safe, but we want to start pulling from it right away. Well, let's make all that, 20% up front and then start pulling 10% from the policy. So there are some investment options out there from the annuity side where it'll offer you a big bonus up front. And the plan, I think, would be more so to either leave that to the beneficiaries or utilize the money early compared to letting it just sit and grow for 30 years.
Yeah, and I think you want that a pretty short term of a transition to beneficiaries, because what you're giving up when you go with a bigger bonus or they give you that upfront money, there's two things. One, you got to see if it's vested right away. Is it vested? Some companies won't vest it right away, so that means that you could lose it. Some don't apply it right away, so you don't get that interest on interest. So you got to be aware of that. But then another thing is that really you have to look at what does it do to your earning power? What are you giving up? It's always a give. If you're going to get money up front, they're going to take away something else somewhere else. There's only so much money there that they can work with. So if they're giving you this, they're going to take that. If it's going to be income, it's not going to be so great at growth. If it's going to be good at growth, they're not going to have a very good income story. So there's definitely give and take, and it's just something to kind of be aware of. And these are tools that can, again, definitely be very vital ways to be able to create that mailbox money, as Victor says, that paycheck money that's going to pay your bills for you during your retirement. And they have a specific purpose. So try not to get too caught up in just the bells and whistles and what sounds good. They would say the sizzle of the steak, and make sure that you're really looking at the steak itself, because you want to make sure that this fits into your plan overall and it has a purpose, and you aren't sitting there in 5 or 10 years going, I don't know I have this thing. I don't even know what it does. And then you've been paying all these fees. So hopefully you found these two last podcasts helpful. Hopefully you've learned a little bit. If you have questions, you want to reach out to us, you can either visit us on the website at eliteretirementgroup.com, or you can give us a call at 715-341-8899. We'd love to hear from you. Any kind of other things. If you want to hear us talk about something specifically, if there's another product out there, if there's a concept out there, if there's a question that you have and you want us to cover it here on the Elite Wealth Podcast, just let us know. We'd be more than happy to talk about it and share our thoughts with you. Outside of that, guys, I think we're done for this week, and we'll see you next week.